This video series is all about trail cameras, and in part 1 we're going to share with you 4 different trail camera locations where you can hang your cameras this fall to get great pictures of whitetail deer and other wildlife.
Mossy Oak Properties, where outdoorsmen find their favorite place.
Well, it's almost that time of year, our favorite time of year, which is
deer season.
Yeah, along with deer season, one of the things that we need to go out and do, well, you don't need to, but it's one of those fun things that you could do on your property or your lease ground or whatever, is to inventory your whitetails and other wildlife.
That's right. One of my favorite parts of deer season is actually the build up to it.
Oh, yeah.
The anticipation, and one of my favorite ways to kind of participate in that anticipation is running trail cameras in August, September, and then once we get into deer season, obviously you're keeping an eye on the deer on your property, the bucks and the does, and where they're at, what they're doing, and what times of the day. But it's really exciting. It's cool how far trail cameras have come since
I started it. You just film.
Exactly. They're such an invaluable tool.
Yeah.
If you think about it, could you imagine deer hunting without them these days?
I tell you what, a lot of people couldn't hunt with them.
Exactly. We've gotten to that point, but as we mentioned in the intro, in this video we're going to go over 4 different locations that you and I hang our trail cameras to learn about the deer on our property for one, but also just to get really cool pictures and videos of deer and other wildlife. And I think we're going to start right off the bat with food sources.
Yeah, food sources are one of the, probably the #1 places that people put their deer cameras, because you put in all this work and you want to see the fruits of your labor, if you will. See how many deer are just destroying your food plot, eating themselves out of house and home. But food plots definitely is one of those ones where it's almost a fail-proof type of thing, where you are going to get something.
Absolutely. If you plant a food plot, slap a trail camera on a tree or a T-post or whatever on that food plot, and you're going to get pictures of deer for sure, which is really cool and exciting. But if you dig a little bit deeper, you can learn a lot more about how deer are using that food plot. For example, times of the day. If you're getting, it's really cool to get a picture of a mature buck in your food plot, but if it's after dark, if it's only pictures of that buck at night and that's the deer you're hunting, you kind of know to maybe stay away from that food plot. Or some food plots, if they're a small staging food plot close to a bedding area, they might get more traffic during the morning versus the afternoon, or you might find out a food plot is more active in the afternoon. Either way, putting a trail camera on your food plot, you're going to learn how deer are using it and what times of the day.
Yeah, there's even trail camera systems out there, companies that have a camera that it's almost like live feed, where you can watch deer browse on, you can watch the food plot grow to the deer utilizing it nonstop. All you have to do is just pull out that old device of ours that's always in our pocket, and you can watch that activity all the time. But Cody's right. And having certain cameras, depending on your financial status or well-being, having multiple cameras around the food source is a plus. That way deer kind of sometimes shy away from those cameras, whether it's a flash or whatever, a red light or whatever. They kind of get a little spooked occasionally by that. And having multiple, that way the deer can't avoid it. Put like 20 around it and be good to go. Yeah, but yeah, food plots for sure. It's almost, like I said, it's almost a fail-proof where you're going to have instant results.
Absolutely, but when it comes to food sources, think a little bit beyond just food plots for your trail cameras, especially leading up into deer season. Food sources, obviously, for a deer are more than just food plots. And when you're thinking of food sources and trail cameras, think hard and soft mass trees.
Excellent.
Those first dropping acorns are, where I'm at in Appalachia, it's big timber country, and I run trail cameras on food plots for sure, but if I find a white oak that's dropping early, I put a camera there. That's what's going to take the best inventory of all the bucks in the area for me. Once they clean up all the acorns, then they'll go to food plots. But hard and soft mash trees. Soybeans is another option late summer and to fall as those beans start to yellow.
Yeah, and they go side by side as also corn. The deer are switching to that carb content, getting away from that high protein type diet. Acorns drop, Cody mentioned that. And obviously corn being more fatty, that their clock is ticking, they know. You know what I mean? So yeah, so just your food sources, think about what a deer biology, the biology of a whitetail deer and what they need that time of year. And that's where you should put your cameras on this food source. But I do like the old thinking outside the box. Always think food plots, your hard and soft mass, berries, etc. Whatever you have going on.
So we talked about food sources. Let's talk about another resource that whitetails and all wildlife need, especially this time of year, is water.
Yeah.
Putting trail cameras on water sources, especially water holes. As we transition from late summer to fall, a lot of that native vegetation, as we talked about in an earlier video, the majority of a whitetail's water intake comes from native vegetation. Late summer, early fall, all those plants are starting to dry up. They're consuming more carb-rich foods like beans or corn or acorns, and while there is some water content in those food sources, it is limited compared to native vegetation that they get during the summer. So water is a limited resource, and if you got a water hole or a water source on your property, trail camera is a great place to put it this time of year.
Yeah, ponds, creeks, you know, just not necessarily a water hole or a tub. And going along with that, you know, inventorying your deer, you know, hey, you know, Captain Hook is showing up, you know, that's a popular name. Captain Hook is showing up at here at X amount of time, hey, that's great. But one thing that you can use, especially with disease and health concerns, EHD. We could sit there and see inventory or whitetail deer and the health aspect of things, what the community is doing, because your deer, again, is not your deer, it's everybody's deer in a community. So everybody can kind of keep inventory on the health of your deer herd. So definitely water sources. This time of year, the August, September, is usually like in the Midwest, and a lot of places like the Mid-Atlantic and stuff, I'm sure in the South too, is, you know, EHD is prevalent this time of year.
Right.
And obviously deer are going to go to that water source, whether it's a creek, pond, or a water hole, you know, so.
And as we transition from late summer or into fall, September, especially into October to November, the bucks that you're going to be hunting, they're going to start covering a lot of ground. They're going to be putting some miles on, scent checking for does, looking for does, and they are going to hit water sources hard. They're expending a lot of energy, covering a lot of ground, and if you got a water source, it's going to be a great spot, A, to hunt, but also to put a camera, obviously, and to run inventory. Yeah,
because a lot of times we'll get deer cameras or video. We set ours on video most times, and those bucks are sitting their mouth open, panting like a dog, you know, and they just take a quick drink and move on. But I tell you what, you wouldn't have gotten that deer if you didn't have it on a water source, especially that time of year. So always save a camera for that purpose alone, whether it's a creek or pond or whatever.
Right, and to piggyback on the rut, which gets us all excited, that will take us to our next trail camera location, which is probably my favorite spot to hang a trail camera, basically October through the end of season. I put them on food plots and trails and water holes, but to me, the best, most exciting place to hang a trail camera during the month of October and November is on a natural scrape or a mock scrape.
Yeah, mock scrapes itself. You get, I mean, how many, it's amazing when you put your camera on a scrape, let's just call it a natural scrape, the amount of different age class deer that visit like one of those big old scrapes. I mean, you get 1.5-year-old bucks on up to the ones that we're trying to harvest, the does that visit it as well. You can, I mean, it's like a water hole. It is like using putting it on a food plot, because you can inventory the health of the deer, you know, what's using it, like who, you know, like who's this guy?
Right.
I mean, we can learn so much by putting them on scrapes.
That's right. They're really a social hub. Social media is popular this day and age. A scrape is kind of like a Facebook or an Instagram where everybody comes and they have their profile. When a deer, believe it or not, they're really social animals. You don't think of them as being social because they're not vocal. Does bleat, bucks grunt, but they're not social like other social animals. They communicate socially, chemically, and when a buck, doe, even a fawn, when they work the scrape, they're leaving a lot of scent and information, preorbital gland, forehead gland, when they rub, urinate, tarsal gland. And they're depositing a lot of scent and information in that scrape, and that's how they communicate to all other deer in the area. So October, when we're in the rut, when bucks are moving, does, they're wanting to be bred in that same window, so they are moving, they are communicating as well. There's arguably no better place to put a trail camera to run inventory and to gauge really the stage of the rut or how deer are moving that time of year than a mock scrape or a natural scrape.
Yeah, and what's really fun, once you do that and you start like, hey, let's try things, putting it on a mock scrape and using different scents, Armor All, I've heard, Pepsi, Coke, and just seeing how the deer react to it, make a mock scrape and just do different things. And what's really interesting, you know, I've seen it myself where you put, I forget what it was, but I think it was a pop, and that buck came back and he destroyed that scrape. it's really neat to have fun. That's what we're supposed to be doing.
That's right. They're really curious animals. So I mean, a mock scrape, as soon as a deer hits it, it becomes a natural scrape. So once you get it started, deer are so curious. Once one deer hits it and leaves that scent information, another's going to want to come check it out. My only final thought on a mock scrape is if you have a trail camera that has the capability to put it on video, is to put it on video. Because it's so cool to watch deer of all age classes. Fawns, because they're so short that sometimes they can't reach the licking branch, so they're on their hindquarters, and then you get those big mature bucks like raking their head and antlers in the licking branches. Just watching deer in their natural state, undisturbed, at a mock scrape is something we rarely get to experience ourselves in the stand. Rarely do we see that, but with a trail camera, it gives us a glimpse into the whitetails world that we wouldn't normally see, and a mock scrape is a great place to do that.
And lastly, on that topic, the mock scrape, the other wildlife that utilize that mock scrape, that if you put it on video, you get real action of what's going on, other than, the predators obviously, but other wildlife. I mean, turkeys will sit there and go, it's weird how it's almost like a water hole where water is life. That scrape is, like Cody said, such a social type spot that other wildlife will utilize that as well. So the last one that we need to talk about is one that I feel where it is touch and go. It's one of those things where it could break you if done wrong, and we're going to discuss all that later, but is transition zones, deer runs, from bedding to your food sources, those little spots where it's like, I want to see what's utilizing this.
Right. And one thing to keep in mind with deer runs, transition zones, deer trails, whatever you call them, is I think they're most effective from a trail camera strategy during the rut, pre-rut, leading up to the pre-rut, when bucks are really covering ground, scent checking does, looking for does. I think that's when you're going to get your best and most pictures of deer on trails and transition zones. And as Eric mentioned, they can be kind of hit or miss. For where I'm at, if you were to, a trail may be this wide and a deer can step here or here, and if you might not get a picture of it, I put them on logging roads or as a transition zone. It doesn't have to be a deer trail. Just think of how a deer is getting from point A to B, a food source to a bedding area, vice versa, whatever the case may be. You can get a good inventory of how deer are using your entire property through these transition areas.
Yeah, and along with the rut, another time where to utilize that is the latter part of this hunting season. That stressful time of year where a lot of us still have tags. we're hunting into December and into January. So, those bucks might disappear, but put those cameras back in that transition area, those runs, logging roads, whatever, so you can, because those boys are, they're still going to be on their feet looking for food, and it's a good, instead of putting it on a water hole where it's just frozen in my neck of the woods. Water hole does nothing for you. But a transition from food to bedding is what we want, especially that latter part of the year.
That's right, and the cool thing to me about deer trails or logging roads, however wildlife you're going to navigate through your property, is you get a lot of cool pictures and videos of animals other than whitetails, which is really cool, because we get, especially during deer season, that's all we're going through our trail camera cars looking for is big bucks usually. Doe, fawn, big buck. We don't pay as much attention to other wildlife, but especially on video mode. And again, if you have the means, I recommend video mode over pictures, because it's so cool to just watch wildlife undisturbed. And get that really cool footage. But where I'm at, we get bears walking down logging roads or deer trails, which is so cool. Bobcats, coyotes, turkey, a flock of turkeys, watching them cluck their, make a bunch of racket,
and gobble and all that.
Absolutely, you get a really cool look into not just deer, but all wildlife on your property when you put trail cameras on transition zones.
Yeah, and don't be afraid, to piggyback on what Cody was saying, don't be afraid just to get off the deer mode and put it on. We right now we're doing gruff grouse. I have a camera on a log that we're going to put on all year long. And it was funny because every time we would get a deer camera video, we're like, hey, how about we position the camera this way? Next thing you know, we got a camera shooting down, and it's like, this is so much fun. But other, like geese, sandhill crane, and this sky's the limit. Don't be afraid just to get it off the old deer mentality.
That's right. Trail cameras, as we mentioned in the beginning of the video, they've come so far. They used to be, I remember my first one it used to be that film, bright white flash. I had to take the SD card to Walmart to put it in the picture reader. And you get 50 pictures and maybe 3 would be of a deer. Rarely was it ever of a big buck. But now they've come so far, and just to piggyback on what Erich said, be creative, think outside the box, get out of deer mode and ruffed grouse, strut zones for turkeys during the spring, put them on a water hole at ground level to get how all their wildlife beyond deer are using a water hole. Really be creative. There's such a fun and valuable tool that we have as wildlife managers that just limiting them to just deer, you're really doing a disservice to the tool. So with all that being said, consider those 4 trail camera locations we talked about in this video for especially running inventory this time of year for deer, but also consider all wildlife. Remember that trail cameras are a lot of fun. Think outside the box, be creative with them, and you'll be amazed at the pictures and videos that you can capture of all wildlife on your property.
Mossy Oak Properties, where outdoorsmen find their favorite place.